The highway shoulder was slick with frost when I stopped the car. My headlights caught something standing just beyond the guardrail. Still, thin, and facing the wrong way, I kept the engine running. The clock on the dash blinked 3:17 a.m. The meter still counted from the last fare, though I hadn't had a rider for almost an hour. The radio buzzed in low static. I turned it down and listened. The wind didn't move the trees. There was only the hum of the idling engine and that figure, half lit, not turning. When I stepped out, the cold went straight through my shoes. The air smelled like hot metal from the exhaust. I called out just once and waited. Nothing. Then the rear door lock clicked from inside. Before we get into what really happened that night, make sure you're somewhere quiet. This story isn't about ghosts or monsters. It's about one fare I picked up during my third year driving nights. The only one I still think about every time I see an empty road at dawn. The heater fan made a dry clicking sound when I turned it up. It was almost midnight, and the shift had gone quiet. Most of the bars had already closed. The dispatch radio was down to a single voice, Marlene, the night operator, reading off empty calls. The roads outside town were clear and cold. The air carried a thin film of frost that gathered on the windshield wipers. Every few minutes, I'd run them once to scrape the glass clean. The smell inside the cab was the usual mix of vinyl, spilled coffee, and winter coats. I worked the northern circuit, small towns connected by 2-lane highways and long stretches of farmland. Out there, you could drive 20 minutes without seeing another pair of headlights. The only light came from the green glow of the dashboard and the distant pulse of red beacons from cell towers. Most nights were routine. I liked it that way. Keep the meter running, log the miles, stay moving. I'd stop for coffee at a truck stop around 2 a.m., then circle back toward the highway to catch any late fares from the industrial park. That night, the roads had a hollow sound, the kind you hear when snow hasn't fallen yet but the cold has settled in. The tires hummed softly and the mirrors trembled in their mounts. Around 1:40 a.m., I passed the same rest area I'd seen earlier in the evening. The vending machines glowed under the shelter awning, untouched. A single semi idled near the edge of the lot, exhaust drifting sideways across the snow line. I remember checking the clock, then glancing at the back seat out of habit. Empty. My jacket lay folded beside the plastic divider. The faint smell of pine air freshener had gone flat from the heat. The next fare didn't come through dispatch. It came from the roadside. No call, no record. I only saw a shape, faint in the headlight beam just before the next turnoff. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People waved cabs down sometimes, especially near the mills. What I remember most is the quiet. When I slowed, I realized the radio had stopped its background hiss. It wasn't off, just silent. I rolled to the shoulder. Frost glittered on the guardrail, and the high beams caught something pale standing a few yards out, still like it was waiting for the light to reach it. The figure didn't move at first. From the driver's seat, all I could see was the outline of a person. No coat color, no face, just that pale shape at the edge of the light. I leaned across and hit the window switch. The motor buzzed halfway down before catching. Cold air slid in, sharp with the smell of wet asphalt and diesel from a truck that had passed minutes earlier. "Need a ride?" I said. There wasn't an answer. I waited another few seconds, then reached for the gear shift to pull away. That's when the figure started walking toward the car. Slow steps, steady, like each one was measured. When the person reached the back door, I heard the latch lift once. Not a knock, just the mechanical click. The door opened, then shut, soft and deliberate. The weight shifted the rear suspension. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing clear. The interior light hadn't triggered when the door opened. I tapped it twice with my finger, and it flickered on for half a second. Enough to show a shoulder, a sleeve, and part of a face turned away. Then it went dark again. "Where to?" I asked. The answer came after a pause, just one word, low and flat. I won't repeat it yet. It was a name, or maybe a place, but it didn't register. I just keyed the meter and started driving. The air in the car changed as soon as we moved. The heater was still running, but the temperature dropped, like the air conditioner had kicked on. I adjusted the vents without looking back. After a few miles, I noticed something strange on the fare display. The digits weren't climbing right. The tenths would rise, then fall back a step, like the meter was rewinding by itself. I tried resetting it. Nothing changed. The road ahead narrowed to a single lane where the county line split. The reflectors were missing from the posts, and the only light came from my high beams bouncing off the frost. In the mirror, I could make out a faint reflection, maybe the edge of a face, but it didn't match the position of the passenger. It looked higher, closer to the divider glass. I tried small talk once or twice, out of habit. Simple things. "You from around here?" And "You said you're heading to where again?" Each time there was that pause, the faint sound of breath, then silence. After 10 minutes, I realized I'd been driving without checking the GPS. I reached over and tapped the screen. The route line showed no active trip. The location marker blinked, then froze. I slowed down and asked again for the address. This time, I heard movement in the back, the sound of fabric against vinyl, and a voice, quiet but closer. "Keep going. No direction. Just that. I drove another few miles. The road bent through a stretch of forest where the branches formed a tunnel overhead. The radio picked up static again, faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing through a speaker. I turned it off. At one point, I checked the side mirror and caught the beam of another car behind me. But when I turned back to the road, it was gone. No lights, no reflection, nothing. The passenger hadn't moved. The only thing that changed was the smell. It wasn't strong, but I noticed it between breaths, like damp soil or leaves after rain, the kind of scent that comes from old basements. When I finally reached the crossroads where the county map ended, I stopped. The road ahead was unpaved and dipped into fog. I turned halfway in my seat and asked again, calm as I could, "Is this it?" The rear door clicked once. Not open, not shut, just the lock shifting by itself. Then a single word came from the dark. Left. I turned the wheel. The tires sank slightly as the pavement gave way to gravel. The headlights caught the mist ahead, flattening it into a white wall. The meter light flickered once, then went dark. I slowed to 15, then 10. The road was narrower than it looked. Frost coated the branches that hung over it, and each time they brushed the roof, a small rasping sound followed, like fingernails across fabric. No signal on the radio. No GPS line on the screen. Just the steady hum of the engine. Behind me, the passenger hadn't said another word. I could hear breathing now, soft and steady, timed with each bump in the road. It sounded like someone fighting sleep, but never quite falling into it. Every few minutes, I checked the rearview mirror. Each time, the reflection gave something different. Once, a shape close to the divider glass. Another time, nothing but the headrest. Once, just the faint glint of eyes catching the dashboard light. I told myself it was just the reflection of my own hand on the wheel, or the way the beam hit the window. I kept driving. The fog thickened until I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or if the world was sliding past the car. At one point, the smell of damp earth came stronger, heavier now, mixed with something metallic like rust. I thought maybe the heater core was leaking again. I turned it off and cracked the window. The cold came in hard. A sound followed, faint at first, then clear enough to name. Knocking. Not from the back seat, but from underneath. 3 short, even taps. I pulled to the shoulder, if there was one, and cut the engine. The sound stopped. I sat there a while, breathing into my hands, listening. The fog pressed against the windshield, sliding down in long streaks. The dome light stayed off, then I heard movement again. This time, from behind the divider. The seat creaked, and something shifted its weight. I turned halfway in my seat. The darkness behind me was solid, like smoke without motion. "Everything okay back there?" I asked. The reply came from farther away than it should have. Not from the seat, but lower, near the floor. "Keep going." I started the engine again. The headlights cut through the fog just enough to show a new sign ahead. Small, white, hand-painted. The lettering was uneven, maybe from weather. It said Dunley Road. There's no Dunley Road on the county map. I'd driven that area for years. But the sign was there, half buried in frost, and a dirt track ran past it into the trees. I thought about turning back, but the voice in the back seat didn't say anything this time, and the silence pressed down hard enough that I kept going just to break it. The dirt road turned slick with patches of ice. The car tilted slightly to one side. A branch scraped along the rear door, leaving a dry screech that made me flinch. Then the headlights caught something on the ground. Tire tracks, fresh, 2 parallel lines curving ahead, leading deeper in. I followed them until they stopped at a small clearing. The fog thinned just enough to show a fence made of old timber posts, half collapsed, and what looked like the remains of a house beyond it. I shifted into park. The passenger moved again, slow and deliberate, as if adjusting a coat. I heard the seatbelt slide back through its slot. "This it?" I said. The sound that came next wasn't speech, more like a sigh pressed into the glass. Then the rear door opened, smooth, noiseless. I didn't hear it shut. I waited. A minute passed. And then 2. The cold crept in through the open door. I leaned back just enough to see if the interior light would trigger. It didn't. The back seat was empty. But the seat cushion was still pressed down, as if someone were sitting there. I got out and stood by the car. The ground was soft with frost, but there were no footprints. Just the faint outline of tire marks that ended at the fence. I called out once, but the sound didn't carry. The fog muffled everything. That's when I heard it again. That low tapping sound 3 times from the trunk. I froze. My keys were still in the ignition, and the lights stayed on. The trunk lid shivered once, barely an inch. I stepped back toward the driver's door, trying to decide whether to look or leave. Then the tapping came again. Slower this time, but from inside the car. When I turned, the rear door was closed. The impression on the seat was gone. I stood there until my breath started fogging up the side window. Then I got back in, shut the door, and locked it. The dashboard clock blinked 3:17 a.m., the same time I'd seen before I'd stopped on the highway. The meter screen came back on by itself, showing a total fare of 0 puertos. When I put the car in reverse, the headlights hit the fence again. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing by it, not facing me, just still, the way they had been when I first stopped. Then the fog swallowed the shape. I drove back toward the main road without the GPS, following only memory. The fog lifted near dawn, and when it did, I found myself on a stretch of highway I didn't recognize. No mile in it, the sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky had gone pale gray. I kept the car steady, watching the empty horizon. The heater fan rattled once, then steadied itself. Somewhere between one breath and the next, I looked in the rearview mirror. No reflection. Not of me, not of the back seat, nothing. But the seat behind me was pressed down again. That was all. Just weight, not visible, but there. I didn't pull over. I didn't speak. I drove until the light came up over the fields and the shadow on the seat faded, slow as a breath leaving the car. I reached town just after 6. The streets were still empty, the sidewalks wet from thawing frost. I parked behind the depot, next to the other company cars, and sat with the engine idling. The dispatcher hadn't logged my last trip. The board showed my last fare as ending at 1:38 a.m., same as before I'd stopped. No entry after that. No cash total, no GPS trail. I asked Marlene if there'd been any glitch on the system, but she said the line had been fine all night. When I checked the cab, everything looked normal. The back seat was dry, no mud, no prints. The only thing out of place was the smell, that faint, damp earth scent still clinging to the fabric. I left the windows down in the lot to air it out. The smell didn't fade. That week, I drove the day shift instead. The nights had started to feel too quiet. But every so often, around the same time, the dashboard clock would blink to 3:17 on its own and reset. The mechanic couldn't find any reason for it. A few months later, during inspection, the manager asked about a scratch along the inside of the rear door. It ran the full length of the window, thin and precise, like something had traced the glass from the inside out. I didn't remember seeing it before. I stopped using that car soon after. They reassigned it to a younger driver, a guy who didn't mind the overnight routes. He kept it clean, replaced the mats, took down the old pine air freshener. 2 weeks later, he asked if anyone else ever had trouble with the trunk latch. Said it would pop once in a while when he hit the brakes, even when locked. He said it like it was nothing, just mechanical. But he stopped talking when he saw my face. I didn't tell him to avoid that stretch of highway. It's not marked on any map anymore. The sign for Dunlay Road isn't there either. They resurfaced that section last spring. Still, when I drive the bypass at night, I sometimes see the frost gather in a line along the guardrail, the way it did that first time. The radio will cut out for half a minute, and the cabin gets cold, even with the heat running. Once, I thought I heard a voice through the static. Not words, just a slow breath, timed with the meter beeps. I left it on that night, just listening. A year later, almost to the day, I took the long route home after a late shift. The road was clear, just a thin crust of ice on the shoulder. As I passed the old turnoff, I glanced in the mirror. For a second, just one, the rear door lock clicked down by itself. Then the meter blinked once, like it remembered the fare, and the radio, dead silent until then, whispered through static, "Keep going."